Posjeta Memorijalnom centru u Srebrenici je teško putovanje. Potrebni su sati da stignete tamo zahtjevnim cestama. Ali oni koji odu nikada neće biti isti. A oni koji su preživjeli vidjeli su najgore ljudske okrutnosti. Ipak, uz sve to, nakon sati iscrpljujućih detalja, gdje ostaju cipele i predmeti onih koji su ubijeni. Ona je i dalje nasmijana, majka šehida, udovica šehida. Njeno ime je Ferida. Ona kaže, sve su mi oduzeli, ali vjeru nikada. Još imam Allaha i svoj glas za njih. Smijem se jer mi to ne mogu oteti. Napisao je dr. Suleiman prilikom svoje prve posjete Memorijalnom centru Srebrenica 2021. godine. Ugledni teolog, aktivista za ljudska prava, predsjednik Jakin instituta za islamska istraživanja, dr. Suleiman, naš je gost u narednim minutama. Dobar vam dan i hvala vam što ste izdvojili vrijeme da gostujete danas u programu Hayat televizije.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
Dr. Suleiman, oni koji odu nikada neće biti isti, kazali ste nakon prve posjete Memorijalnom centru Srebrenica. Šta je ono što ste vi doživjeli i kakav je utisak na vas ostavio ta posjeta Srebrenici?
So growing up, before I came to Bosnia, Bosnia came to me. I am the child of two Palestinian refugees. My father was born in 1943, 5 years before the occupation of the State of Israel of Palestine. My mother was born in 1951 as a refugee in Syria and eventually back to Palestine, and my parents met in the United States. Growing up, we saw the heartbreaking images of Bosnia like so many other people. And I remember her writing poetry about Sarajevo and about Srebrenica, a Palestinian mother crying and shedding tears and writing poetry about this place. And I remember coming home from school one day and seeing refugees from Bosnia in my home. So it went from the newspapers to a few clips on TV to some of the stories of people that would come over there to the conferences and things of that sort to it actually being in my home. Children like me, but who had lived a very different experience. And so I've never been able to go back to Palestine. This is before the current genocide in Gaza started. I came here in 2021 and it felt like I'd come home. It's the closest thing to what I've envisioned about going home to Palestine was coming to Bosnia because it was so close to my mother's heart and so close to our hearts as a whole. And the gratitude that people showed for just basic humanity being acknowledged, for basic solidarity, for basic expressions of empathy, was something I'd never forget. There's something about going to Srebrenica when it's quiet. This is my second time coming to Bosnia, and inshallah, I will continue to come home to Bosnia. But when I came in 2021, I was actually, I think, the only person in the museum that was being shown around when I went to the graveyard. I think there was one other family that was visiting their shuhada. It was cold in every sense of the word. Cold in terms of the stench of death and genocide that remained in the air. Cold in terms of how lonely the people must have felt as they were abandoned by a world that claimed that it would never let something like this happen again. Cold in that the mother's eyes, even though they smiled, you could see the death and the destruction and what had been taken away from them. There are people that are alive, but they really don't live anymore in this world. Their hearts have already transitioned along with the bodies of their loved ones and the souls of their loved ones. They long for a reunion outside of this world, and they exist here as devices, as vehicles to convey the tragedy of what happened before. But they do that from a place of empathy for those that come after them so that this doesn't happen to anyone else the way that it happened to them. I didn't feel any bitterness. I remember thinking to myself, how do they not speak with anger? I didn't hear anger in the voices of the mothers, even though anger is justified, but just pain. pain, but at the same time, there was a sense of contentment that Allah would take care of them, that even if humanity failed them, God did not fail them, and resilience. And I think that what really symbolizes the Bosnian spirit is the kindness that the people show here. It's such a beautiful and warm place. Cruelty can either turn you into a monster, like the monstrosity that was shown to you, or it can build in you a resolve that I will never become the monster that was a monster to me. And I think that the people of Bosnia, whether I've met them in the United States or met them here, I've never seen cruelty. I've seen nothing but kindness and compassion. And so that experience lived with me. And then of course now, 2023 happens, and coming to Bosnia to commemorate a genocide, while my people in Palestine are in the midst of a genocide, has an entirely different meaning today.
Kazali ste prilikom svoje posjete Sarajevu, čini mi se prošle godine kada ste imali predavanje u Sarajevu, da Bosnu i Hercegovinu osjećate svojom domovinom, jednako kao Palestinu, iako ste rođeni u SAD-u.
Yeah, I mean, look, I am a product of a mother who grieved for the world, and specifically for Bosnia. This scarf that I wear is handmade by a mother in Gaza who lost her children. This is, of course, the symbolism that I think many people don't pay attention to, of the mothers of Srebrenica surrounding the casket of a child. How many times do we see now mothers in Gaza surrounding a child? And the child is wrapped in white, but with the stain of blood. But it's the same tears. And that's the point, is that the tears that were shed here and the tears that continue to be shed are the tears that my mother shed, the tears that the mothers of Gaza shed. If more people demonstrated a sense of empathy and brotherhood and sisterhood, then these crimes would not be allowed to happen. I just visited Vogošća and spoke to some of those that had witnessed some of the crimes in the villages, similar crimes, and it's always the lesser known incidents as well that happen along the way that are pushed to the side and their stories don't get as much attention. And I couldn't help but think to myself that the problem is not that evil exists. The problem is not that there are enough evil people in the world that will commit these types of crimes. The problem is that there aren't enough people that will stand up to that evil. There's too much apathy in the world. There's too much of an indifference to where I see this and I say, well, it's not my problem. I'm not Bosnian. I'm not Palestinian. I'm not Sudanese. I'm not this, I'm not that. And that's how these tragedies have unfolded in the world, that I am not this person. And so you wait for evil to show up at your doorstep. And the same way that you ignored someone else's cries, your cries will now be ignored. And so the human condition is then perpetual in crisis and corruption and tyranny that goes unchecked. What we are living right now is what we're seeing is that even if a genocide plays out on your screens with social media, I mean, I think back to Srebrenica, and it was only a few video clips that we saw, but I remember every single one of those video clips. I remember every face that I saw in those video clips. It's as real to me now as it was 30 years ago. I remember it. I remember those clips. Now people scroll through, and the overload of imagery has not led to any increase in humanity. To the contrary, it shows that the same depravity that we saw in Srebrenica exists there today. My point is that Bosnia really introduced to me a certain element of humanity. My parents did not teach me that the people of Bosnia were separate from the people of Palestine. My parents saw the same tears in the eyes of the mothers in Srebrenica that they saw in their own mother's eyes and that they themselves had. And when I came here, you know, I read a poem about Sarajevo actually at the time, where my mother wrote, and I thought, you know, I looked at the date, and she had written that poem in 1991, I believe. So 30 years later, here I am, her son, reading this poem here A Palestinian mother wrote that poem in the United States. I was here for a genocide tribunal for Kashmir in Bosnia, reading those words in Sarajevo. And that's the point, that my heart was already here before I got here physically. And in a world where we're supposed to be coming closer to each other, but we're becoming more polarized, we have to show what transcendence actually looks like. Do I have to have a shared identity with the victim? Do I have to look like the victim? Do I have to physically be in the place of the victim? Do I have to be at fear of the same aggressor to that victim in order to feel that connection? And for me, that was never an issue. That was never the case. Bosnia was home. And so coming here, you know, even when I landed in the airport this time around, I recognized it right away. Like, I looked around, I was like, yeah, I remember this, and I remember that, and I remember this. And I traveled the world all the time, but it just felt so different. It felt like a homecoming.
Jako nam je drago zbog toga što se tako osjećate i nadam se da će takav osjećaj uvijek biti prisutan kod vas. Vratimo se malo majkama Srebrenice i toj priči. Spomenula sam i u uvodu u ovo gostovanje zapravo vaše riječi koje ste izgovorili prilikom te prve posjete Memorijalnom centru Srebrenica. Spomenuli ste ih i vi u uvodnom odgovoru na moje pitanje. Majke Srebrenice su žene koje su se zapravo izborile da se genocid naziva genocidom. To su žene kojima su ubijeni članovi porodice, ubijene su im djeca, ubijeni su im muževi, očevi, rođaci. Ostale su bez jednog člana porodice, no i dalje istrajavaju u svojoj borbi. Gledale su zločince u oči, svjedočile pred sudovima. Danas žive među onima koji su ubijali njihove najmilije. Može li svijet naučiti išta od majki iz Srebrenice i koliko je do sad naučio?
I think of the Srebrenica mothers, and I think of the mothers who are involved in these painful incidents in history and in the present. And the amount of pain that it takes to bring a human life, to birth a human life into this world, is nothing like the amount of pain to see that same life taken away from you. And as you mentioned, these mothers have not just seen one or two, in many cases, they've seen every single family member, male family member, killed in front of their eyes. And that doesn't begin to describe the pain that they themselves felt. One thing that I noted when I was in Srebrenica, and then today, even in Vogošća, it's amazing to me. Like, subconsciously, they speak of the crimes against other than them, and then they come to what was done to them, the women, which is incredible. Like, if you think about the order of expressing the pain that was inflicted upon you, they start with, this happened to my father, this happened to my husband, this happened to my kids. And then at some point, almost like a footnote, they'll mention what happened to them. And you think to yourself, that's the same love and the same spirit that brought in those lives and that gave them the ability. In many ways, it feels like they're alive to tell the stories of those that were taken away from them. They live to tell the stories of the lives that were stolen from them. And what the world can learn from that is that we're not numbers. We're not numbers. You see 8,000 something in Srebrenica, but how many more people have actually been killed? All of the people whose bones are still being collected. Well, there are these women who are still collecting the pieces of their lives, and they will never be represented in a casualty count. We're not numbers. I think of today in Gaza, Dr. Hayat Najjar, a woman who's a doctor, who was at a hospital. Every day she comes out of the tent, she goes to the hospital to serve the victims in her genocide. And 9 of her 10 kids arrived to the hospital in one strike, dead, charred, burnt, along with her husband. And the sole survivor is only one of her children. Here's a woman that was working to save lives, and in one strike lost 9 of her 10 children. And the last child is wounded and is undergoing medical treatment today. Hayat Najjar will not be in the casualty count of Gaza when it's all said and done. But we have to take into account all the lives that have been stolen, even if they're not killed. And we have to actually commit ourselves to never again. One of the things that bothers me about Bosnia, and I'm sure it bothers the people here, is the delayed condolences. You're too late. You know, you're too late to get here. You're too late to express solidarity. Why is it that we always have to wait for after the tragedy to memorialize it? Why can't we stop it before it happens? Why can't we intervene while it's happening? You're too late. And people who are the victims would much prefer your earlier intervention than your delayed condolences. And that is what we are seeing over and over and over again, that, you know, your oppressors don't mind if after it's all said and done, you get a street named after you or a statue or some sort of memorial that's made for you. Their goal is to erase you and to break you. And you have to stop that before it happens. You have to intervene in the process, not after it's already said and done. And I think that one of the things that I wish to convey being here is that humanity owes Bosnia an apology for being late. And we also can't now have an early departure. We have to make sure that it never happens again here, that there is a consistent order, a consistent sense of safety, so that people are not re-victimized again, so that the children of the victims that survived do not go through that all over again. Intergenerational trauma is a very real thing, and one of the ways that you protect the next generation from reliving that trauma again and again and again is by changing the conditions that led to that genocide in the first place. And so it's important for all of us to say that not only were we with you then, we're with you now, and in the long run, inshallah.
Kada evo već pričamo o tome, ono što me interesuje jeste da, evo, 30. godišnjica genocida u Srebrenici je u petak. Tu će biti prisutni mnogi zvaničnici, kako ovdje iz Bosne i Hercegovine, regije i svijeta. Kad pričamo o svijetu, upravo oni su nam važni. Oni će doći u Srebrenicu, Potočare, i reći će nikad više, da se nikad i nikome ne ponovi u trenucima dok se u Gazi, dok se u Palestini dešava genocid.
Yeah, you know, there was a sense that if only there was more exposure to these crimes, then the world would not let it happen. And again, that has now been completely disproven by Gaza. No amount of exposure to genocide will stop it from happening. The powers that be have to stop it from happening. And the people around the world have to force the issue so that power can act responsibly. I want everyone in Bosnia to know that your protests mean something. That when the people of Palestine who grew up with Bosnia see the streets of Bosnia with Palestine, that it means something. You know, today I asked the brother that was driving, I said, can I get a flag that's half Bosnia, half Palestine? Because I want to carry it with me, because I saw it in one of the protests in Washington, D.C. Actually, if you look at, I think one of the main images that came out of the second largest protest in the history of Washington, D.C., which was for Palestine, and we prayed Salah. When we prayed our prayer, one of the protesters was Bosnian, and they put the flag down there, and it was a half Bosnian, half Palestinian flag. When you show global solidarity, you insist on our togetherness, and you don't let them break us apart. One of the reasons why we have been preyed upon and feasted upon in this way is because we've been separated. The people of Bosnia have been separated themselves. Oppressed peoples in this area are separated from oppressed peoples in this area. You're told that you don't have the capacity to speak about somebody else's genocide because you're still reeling from your own. Let's not put ourselves in further vulnerability by speaking about another vulnerable people. One day when we are strong, we will show solidarity and empathy. It doesn't work that way. What we have to have is a sense of unity amongst people that have tasted the bitterness of oppression, that say we are collectively stronger together. Because those that dine in the halls of power, that see people as mere pawns and little pieces that you can throw around and kill and starve, they're not going to suddenly have a switch in their moral consciousness and start acting in a different way towards those that are hurting as a result of their destruction around the world. But when we show solidarity to each other, and someone might be saying, you know, I'm in Bosnia, like, what does it really mean to someone in Gaza when I do something in the streets here? What am I really affecting change with? And I tell you, as people who have perhaps felt alone in your struggle, that if the only thing is that the people of Gaza don't feel alone when they turn on the TV or when they see on their phones, that these people who don't speak the same language as me, maybe they don't look like me, maybe they don't have the physical power or the current political, geopolitical power to affect the necessary change to stop my genocide, but they're out in the street and they are speaking and they are writing and they're saying, we're with you, we're with you. It's a miserable feeling to feel abandoned, to feel alone. And sometimes what a human being needs in order to take that next step, in order to continue to fight the good fight just one step further, is to know that I haven't been abandoned, that I'm not alone. And so, yes, there's an ongoing genocide. And, you know, one of the first things I remember sharing with someone when I went back, because I love museums. I've been to museums around the world. When I go to South Africa, I go to the Apartheid Museum. When I go to the South in the United States, I go to all the civil rights museums. I love museums. So you know what's different about the museums here? They're operated by the victims. What I've noticed is that when you go to any museum in Bosnia, the people that are taking you from exhibit to exhibit are actually victims. And I don't think that's the case with any museum in the world, which shows you 30 years is not that long ago. Like, this is still very fresh. Genocide is still very much so in the air. We're still burying bodies. We're still finding bones. So if I'm not connecting the finding bones and opening new graves to the people in Gaza who don't even have the dignity of having proper burials, people are carrying the bodies of their children in flesh in grocery bags, paper bags. They're picking up a hand, picking up a head, picking up a toe, screaming at the world and saying, look at me, where are you? Where are you, O world that claims to be civilized? Where are you, O Ummah, O Muslims? You claim to be a global body. Where are you, O Arabs? Where are you, O people? Where are you? Because they can't fathom that the world can see this live in real time. On TV, I can hold a piece of my child and someone's at home with their children playing around them, eating their dinner and just scrolling and moves on. What we need to realize, our criminals lost their humanity a long time ago. We can't lose our humanity. And when we do that, we lose our own humanity. So don't be silent. Don't stop. Whatever you have. You know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that whoever amongst you sees an evil, change it with your hand. If you can't change it with your hand, at least use your tongue. And if you can't use your tongue, then hate it in your heart. You should be, you know, repulsed when you see genocide of the past, genocide of the present, or the makings of a genocide in the future.
Doktore Suleiman, vas na društvenim mrežama prati ogroman broj ljudi. To su milioni ljudi koji vas prate. Vi pričate o represiji koju vidite u svijetu, pričate o ljudskim pravima, o borbi za pravdu. Je li upravo jedan od razloga zbog koje vas toliki broj ljudi prati je to ta žudnja za pravdom i žudnja za ljudskim pravima?
I hope that people are listening. I hope that they're actually seeing this and actually taking charge in their own lives. I don't claim to be anything more than just another voice in a chorus of voices, and my goal is to merely take the microphone and put it to the voices in Gaza right now, or take the microphone and put it to the voices in Bosnia right now. You know, I remember when I came home in 2021, the amount of people that came up to me, over the last few years, by the way, and said, I'll tell you two groups of people. One group of people said, I never knew about this. You know, thank you for opening my eyes to it. About Srebrenica, they never heard the word Srebrenica before. You know, they said, I just started reading about it because you wrote about it. And the amount of Bosnians in the United States, in the United Kingdom, till now, it's been 4 years since I just wrote a few posts and talked about that visit. And obviously every year and beyond, we try to bring light to it. That just say, thank you for remembering us. That's all. I mean, as human beings, we don't actually have that much of a demand on each other. I think that people understand that other decent human beings often can't intervene physically and do what's necessary to protect them. But people don't understand being ignored. Why aren't you just expressing basic human solidarity? A basic condition, right, of empathy. And I'll share this. A lot of times we like to blame other than ourselves. Some of us will blame the governments. Some of us will blame the corporations. But you have to ask yourself, what are you doing to penalize those corporations that are complicit in genocide? What are you doing to put pressure on those governments that are complicit in genocide? Everyone wants to look around and blame somebody else, right? Collectively, as human beings, if we stood together and we disrupted the consistent, ongoing world order for the sake of those that are being suffocated because of it, change will come. Change will come, inshallah. So there has to be a level of commitment. And I hope that people are not just hearing another voice that sedates them, but I hope that they're hearing a voice that helps wake them up, because we all have to just be voices for the voiceless. I say this about Palestine, and I think it's true to an extent for Bosnia as well, that they made us faceless. We can't allow them to make us voiceless. They turned us into numbers. We cannot allow them to remove our names. We have to continue to bring these stories to life, because bringing these stories to life actually might save lives. And so never again has to mean something. And what we're seeing right now, I think that the whole world is being challenged, because every single system of international law is failing the people of Palestine right now. It's failing the people of Gaza right now. And so never again clearly did not mean never again. It didn't mean never again in Srebrenica. It didn't mean never again in Gaza. We have to ask ourselves, is never again for only some people, or is never again for everybody? Because if it's for everybody, then it's certainly not working that way right now.
Hvala vam u ime građana Bosne i Hercegovine, moje lično ime, što se borite i što širite istinu i pravdu i sve ono što se dogodilo u Srebrenici u julu. Ono što mene u nastavku interesuje jeste da vi ste, razmišljajući o dehumanizaciji koju prethodi genocid na 29. godišnjicu genocida nad Bošnjacima u Srebrenici, zaštićenoj zoni UN-a, postavili jedno ključno pitanje. Da li bi žrtve doživjeli istu sudbinu da nisu bili muslimani? Možete li u nastavku, evo meni, ali i našim gledateljima, odgovoriti na ovo pitanje?
I have no problem saying that the answer is absolutely not. There is a global hatred of Islam, a global engineered suspicion of Muslims. What Bosnia proved is that you could be European, so it's not a race thing. You could be European, but if you're Muslim, then there's always going to be a level of suspicion that there's something inside of you that if it ticks, you're suddenly going to become dangerous. You're suddenly going to become violent. And that is what is being used to engineer surveillance of Muslim minorities around the world. So Muslims are governed with particular brutality when they're minorities. And that is what is being used to bomb Muslim countries, right? Unfortunately, you know, I'm an American citizen, and it grieves me that my tax dollars have been used to wipe out millions of human beings from the face of the earth in the name of protecting others from Muslims, right? So there is something about Muslims. Would the world tolerate what is happening to the Palestinians if the Palestinians were not a quote-unquote largely Muslim population? There's this idea that, you know, I hear it all the time as a Palestinian. They say, you know, if the Palestinians were free, then they would just kill every single Jew, and they would wipe out this person and they would engineer all of this terror. And we have to remind people that there's a reason why there are Jewish populations that have lived there for thousands of years. There's a reason why the second or third oldest church in Christianity was in Gaza and bombed by Israel. There is a history there, right? And you dehumanized those people, and you made it seem like those people are too violent because they have something inside of them. They're Muslims, and so they're never truly going to be loyal to humanity, because at the end of the day, they have this internal drive to dominate humanity. When it comes to the people of Bosnia, I have to tell you, as a Muslim who speaks to audiences of multiple faiths around the world, one of the most powerful things I heard when I came here in 2021 was a brother who mentioned to me, he was a professor, Dr. Amin. I remember he said this to me. He said, we had hundreds of mosques destroyed, hundreds of masajid destroyed. But alhamdulillah, we didn't destroy one church. We didn't attack one church. I took that back to the United States, and anytime I'm in a forum of Islamophobia, I say, isn't it interesting that the idea is that Muslims want to destroy every place of worship and Muslims want to wipe everybody else off the face of the earth, but in Bosnia, they didn't destroy any churches, right? These are not qualities of the Muslim, but we live in a world that tells us that Islam is some sort of disease. And if you're infected by it, then the only way to deal with the infected population is to dehumanize them. And so the way that a person rationalizes that in their minds, how do they tolerate the wiping out of Muslims in Bosnia or the Muslims in Palestine or whatever, even though, by the way, there are non-Muslims as well that get wiped out, right? How do they tolerate this? How do they accept women and children being wiped out? Because they are taught to believe that if that child grows up, the likelihood of that child becoming this way is a high enough percentage for me to justify the murder of that child. And so that's why you hear that the majority of the casualties in Gaza, for example, are women and children. And a lot of Americans will shrug their shoulders and go, yeah, but they're crazy people, because they're Muslim. And there's an image that's been given. The people who were victimized in Srebrenica, you have to think about the engineering of the soldiers that committed those crimes and the engineering of the people who watched silently and let that happen. In their minds, there must have been something. Some people truly actually do reach a threshold of evil to where they enjoy killing, they enjoy these mass acts of destruction. But you have to wonder, there are some people that were watching that, and that for a moment probably felt something inside of them wrestling with them saying, this is evil. But then another voice came in and said, yeah, but you never know what they were going to become. You never know the evil that they were going to wreak on the earth if they survived. So if they survive has been used as an excuse for slaughter throughout history. And unfortunately, we live in a global climate of Islamophobia, of anti-Muslim hatred. And we see the effect of that. And we see that it doesn't matter if you're of the same race. It doesn't matter if you are of a different race. It doesn't matter if you're a political power or if you are politically entirely powerless. So long as you have Muslim attached to you, you will be treated with suspicion. And there's a globally engineered machine to unfortunately make people think that way. And we have to insist with facts, with faith, with character, that we will not allow ourselves to submit to that paradigm. We reject that paradigm, that it's historically baseless, and that in the present time, Muslims are not terrorists, Muslims are the victims of terrorism. Statistically speaking, Muslims are the largest victims of global terrorism. And it's terrorism if someone wears a suit and drops a bomb, or if someone wears a uniform and shoots a gun. It's terrorism. Muslims are the greatest victims of terrorism. Muslims are not the greatest perpetrators of terrorism.
Evo, samo za kraj, kada ste spomenuli sve crkve koje su ostale u Bosni i Hercegovini netaknute nakon agresije na Bosnu i Hercegovinu i sve džamije koje su uništene tokom agresije na Bosnu i Hercegovinu, ja ću samo spomenuti i dio da majke Srebrenice, ubijena su im djeca, muževi, rođaci, čitave porodice, no nikada nisu pozvale na ubijanje, nikada nisu pozvale na osvetu. Za kraj, molim vas kratko, negiranje genocida. Može li prestati se sa negiranjem genocida u trenutku dok se dešava genocid?
I don't think that we should focus our efforts on stopping genocide denial. I think we should focus our efforts on stigmatizing genocide denial, on not letting genocide denial have a place in any consequential arena of ideas, of fighting it in academia, of fighting it in politics, of fighting it in society and culture. We can't let genocide denial go unchecked. There will always be people who will deny genocide. There will always be people who will deny your plight. What we have to do is make their voices so irrelevant, so crazy in the realm of ideas, that no one takes them seriously, that their words have no impact. We cannot hinge our success on convincing our oppressors that we're worthy of life. Our success comes through our own insistence on our lives. And I want to say that one of the things I love about the people of Bosnia is that everywhere they go, they carry their identity. You know, sometimes when I meet the victims of various crimes around the world that end up in different countries, you ask them where they're from, and sometimes they kind of whisper, you know, because they don't want to tell you because they're afraid that there might be some sort of judgment, or they look over their shoulder. But anyone I meet and that's from Bosnia around the world, and I say, where are you from? They don't say, why are you asking, or why do you want to know, or I'm from Europe, or I'm from, no, they say, I'm from Bosnia. I say, mashallah, that's wonderful. And I tell them my story, and I tell them about my connection to the people of Bosnia. And we start talking about, you know, Old Town Sarajevo and Chavapi and, you know, the few words that I can muster in the language. And there's something beautiful about that they insist upon that. And what I've noticed is that there is a psychological attempt to remove the association with Islam, with religion, from the Bosnian people. And what I notice, subhanAllah, everywhere I've been, even if someone is not a quote-unquote practicing Muslim, but they take pride in their Islam, that no, we didn't let them take this away from us. We didn't let them take our faith. We didn't let them take our culture. We didn't let them take our identity. We don't put our heads down and say who we are. We say it with a sense of not arrogance, but resistance. And so if that mother of Srebrenica can continue, if a person can still live in these lands with the memory of those crimes, or if a person can be a refugee. You know, I'll end with this, and I know that we've probably gone over time. I was invited to St. Louis, which has the largest Bosnian population in the United States, for the Srebrenica commemoration. And I said to them, I said, listen, I would not say no to this except for going to Srebrenica itself. There was nothing else in the world that would have stopped me from coming to be with you except actually being in Bosnia. If the refugee and the survivor that still stays here can still say, I am Bosnian, I am Muslim, I am a victim of the genocide, but I refuse to be a perpetual prisoner of the genocide. I will live and I will speak so that other people don't have to go through this, then that gives inspiration to the rest of the world to continue forward. The people of Bosnia have been unbreakable. The people of Gaza are unbreakable. And your enemies tried to break you. Our enemies tried to break us. And inshallah ta'ala, we are whole together as peoples.
Doktore Suleiman, hvala vam mnogo za izdvojeno vrijeme, za gostovanje i hvala vam još jednom što širite istinu o genocidu u Srebrenici.
Thank you so much. Thank you.